this afternoon. This will be uh, one of our last pieces of uh, Mecca's Get Out the Vote programming. So we've been doing work and events and student artwork this really leading up to the elections, and we wanted to make sure we had a component that was about um, artists being able to stay engaged after elections and really throughout their art career. And so for this Zoom, um, staying democratically engaged, we have two recent Mecca alum whose artwork and really artistic practice is deeply rooted in making artwork that is tied to and connects to community. And those artists are Athena Lynch and Ashley Page, both of who are tied locally to Portland. And I will step back a little bit and let Athena and Ashley um, introduce themselves and a little bit about what they do.
All right, so I guess I'll go first. Um, Hi, I'm Athena, Mecca alum. I don't know what to say. Exactly. I consider myself a socially and publicly engaged artist. I did some chalking over the summer. That was actually my way of using my work as a form of political protest because I couldn't physically attend the protest because of what I do as work. I work with high risk population. So, me physically being in the midst and amongst the people, I can't do. So, you know, using my creativity and using my art form was my way of still standing in solidarity with the cause. Um, yeah, so it just kind of it sparked. I would have to say it started probably 2018. I did a public piece in Congress Square Park. It was actually for a sculpture class, and Josh told us that we had a connection. Well, he had a connection rather. If anyone wanted to do something in the park, and I was just like, sure, why the hell not? I like a challenge, I like challenging myself with things that I've not done before. So I said, yeah, I'll take a stab at it. Why not? And so I wrote my proposal for the project that I was going to do, and we passed it on to the organization, which is the Friends of Congress Square Park. And I reached out to, at the time, I believe she was the program coordinator, Della, and we went back and forth, corresponding with each other. And we met one day, and I was just like discussing with her, like, what the project is, why I wanted to do the project. And after that, we were just kind of like full steam ahead. And I guess you could say, yeah, it pretty much really kicked off from that point as far as like my artistic career, like really stepping out into the public sphere with my work. And I haven't really looked back since. That was just kind of like the catalyst to it. And I enjoyed it, and I enjoy the fact that, my work gets to interact with the public. And I wish I could like kind of, I guess, bug, so to speak, the areas so I could like watch the reactions of the public and how they interact with it. Like that's probably like my biggest dream, is to like actually witness how people are interacting with it when I'm not there. Because it's one thing to interact with a piece of work when the artist is present, and it's another thing to interact with the work when the artist isn't present. And so I'm very curious as to like what those experiences and those observations were, when I wasn't nearby, to see like just how it was viewed and how it was interpreted. um but yeah, and then this summer, well, actually, backtracking a little bit further, while we were still in, the early stages of the pandemic, back in May, I did another kind of like smaller project where if you were in the Portland area downtown, you may or may not have seen them. But if you happen to see any kind of like red footprints around town, those were my footprints. And that was for Ahmaud Arbery, and in some instances, I actually like wrote some lettering, just saying, like I exist for Ahmaud. You know, one of the things that has been appearing and been like a constant thing when all of that was happening, and then even continues to happen, is people keep saying like I can't breathe, and like I feel like when you say certain things, you kind of speak them into existence. You kind of manifest them with words. You know what I mean? And so, like saying that you can't breathe, and it's like I can breathe. So how can I use my breath? How can I use this tool that's my body, with still with breath in it, to do the work and continue the work, and to speak for those that can't speak up because they're no longer here because they can't breathe. And so, that's how I see to use my work. And so I did the footsteps. There were some in the park, there on Deering Oaks Park. I did some on Casco. Like they were just kind I just kind of scattered them, you know what I mean? And so I did that, and then like the summer officially kicked off, and a lot of the protests were starting up, and I decided to do some chalking, which was kind of also inspired by the We Chalk in Boston, which was a children's. It was originally like organized in Boston for like families and children engaging in social justice, through art and having that conversation. And so I had actually did that with Indigo, and Daniel invited me to do some chalking around Indigo, like around the park over there on Anderson. And I was like, okay, this is cool. And so instead of like just drawing, because like I feel like words are very powerful, and it's one thing to say something to someone and have a conversation. It's another thing to have something written, and it gives that viewer the opportunity with their own time to stop and reflect and really read what the words that they're reading are. And so I was actually chalking quotes, and a lot of the quotes that I was chalking were by activists and artists, from like the 60s and 70s, that have been literally saying the very same thing that people are saying now. And so that also speaks to the fact that we're still having, unfortunately, the same social issues and social injustices that people have been protesting about for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years now. And it's like there needs to be a change, And so yeah, I was just around town. Literally, I just started chalking, and like I just kind of like took it and ran with it. And so I did some chalking in Monument Square. I did chalking at Congress Square Park. I did chalking in front of the museum, in front of the PMA, and I wanted to continue. I still kind of want to continue. Unfortunately, the weather's getting away from me now, but that is something I do want to continue to explore. Um, and then June came around. Well, actually, that was all pretty much around June. I organized a Juneteenth event in Congress Square Park, like at the top of a pandemic. So that's probably like, if there's anything else as far as advice, I would suggest try not to organize a group event when people aren't allowed to to organize and collect together. So that was a bit of a challenge, but it also forced me to learn how to work around, like I'm one of those people where if you tell me I can't do something, I'm just stubborn. So I'm gonna try to do it just for the sake of proving you wrong, and even if it may not 100% be what my initial plan was, but I think it still came together like very well, because like initially I wanted to actually have like a festival, Like I wanted like a full on festival in the park and like really engaging and bringing people in from the community, which I still was able to do, but just kind of like on a slightly different scale. So because of the pandemic and because people weren't allowed to like really gather together safely the way I would have liked to, we were allowed to do an art making project in the park, still centered around social engagement, still centered around learning, still centered around learning about what Juneteenth is, and still in a way gathering and having fellowship with each other, but in a safe way. So we did printmaking, and I was able to partner with quite a few groups and organizations in the community. I was able to partner with Little Chair Printmaking. So I partnered with Hope from Little Chair. Shout out to Hope from Little Chair. I was able to partner with Indigo Arts Alliance, Daniel Marcia Minter. I was able to partner with Maine Youth Justice. So Ali, who was he does the programming, and yeah, he did the programming for Maine Youth Justice. I had him come. I had reached out to Maine Inside Out, which I felt was very necessary to be there, but unfortunately, they weren't doing any like public speaking or public appearances because of the pandemic. So like I still wanted them to be very much so present in that event. So I had someone drop off like literature and information about their organization, because the thing about Juneteenth is like all of those things are interconnected. And it's like a lot of people didn't even know what Juneteenth is, and Juneteenth literally is officially the celebration of the final a group of slaves that were released after the 13th Amendment was put into place. You still had people like further south in Texas and I think a couple of other states that were still enslaved and didn't even know that the 13th Amendment had been passed. And now some people may ask, well, what does that have to do with the group Maine Inside Out? Well, if no one knows what Maine Inside Out is, they're an organization that actually works with people that are formerly incarcerated, and they do outreach programs with at-risk youth and people in the community as well. And so the correlation is that when the 13th Amendment was written, there was kind of a caveat that you can't enslave people. However, you can imprison people. And so once all of these slaves were released, these people were no longer enslaved. So now you have all these kind of like BS like laws that came into play, loitering and sort of quote unquote trespassing. So you had people that were arrested because they literally had no place to go. And so now you literally have essentially created a pipeline to the prison system, which is still what we are dealing with now. Now we have the school to prison pipeline. You know what I mean? And so I felt it was very necessary for organizations like that, that people that are dealing directly with the youth and specifically dealing with individuals that have had a troubled past or are at risk. These are all people that we still have to interact with, and they're still a part of our community, whether some people may feel as though they're not. They are, and they shouldn't be discarded because of mistakes that they've made in their past. Like they're trying to rectify that. They're trying to become better people. And so by doing that event, I really wanted the community at large that weren't aware of these organizations to also become aware of these organizations and like reach out and help them, and like really embrace who they were and who they are as an organization. And so that was an amazing thing. Like I was kind of riding that high for a while because that was like officially my first time organizing a public event on that scale. And it was just kind of funny, like because I did that within like I think maybe 10 days. So I had spoken to Julia from Friends of Congress Square Park like early June. I was speaking to her when I was doing chalking in Congress Square Park, and she's like, "Yeah, if you have any ideas, just give me a call, let me know." And so like I shot her an email. I was like, "Yes, I do have an idea," and this was like June 5th. I was like, "Since you mentioned it, I do." And I was like, I want to do this. And it was like this huge, crazy long email. And she's like, okay, well, I'm going to get back to you and let you know if we can do it or not. And I was like, okay. So I was just like on pins and needles because I'm like, Juneteenth is like really soon. So I kind of need a answer like really soon. And so she got back to me, and like within the time frame she had got back to me, I think I had like, yeah, maybe 10 days, probably yeah, I would say between 7 to 10 days to literally like pull everything together. So like while I was waiting for a response from her, I was still kind of like reaching out to people like, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm waiting to hear if we're going to actually be able to do it. But if we're not being able to do it, we're still going to figure out a way to do something that's similar to it, and we're just going to figure it out. So just keep that little idea in the back of your mind, and don't go anywhere. Try not to plan anything in the next couple of weeks because I'm gonna need you. And yeah, it was amazing. It was crazy because like there was like a lot of press, and anyone that knows me, I'm like not really, I, as crazy as it sounds, is like the fact that I like engaging with the public and I like my work engaging with the public. I'm not a very out front in public person. Like I like to be very incognito. And so it's like all this press, and I'm just like, oh, y'all know who I am now. I don't know how I feel about this. This is kind of weird. Look at the art. Look at the art. Don't look at me. Just look at the art. Look at the work. Look at the work. Pay attention to the work, not me. So because like that's just me, it's like pay look at, I'm my point of all of that was to bring focus to the subject matter and what was at hand and what was happening. I don't want the focus on me. It's not about me. I am merely a piece. I am a fraction of a piece to this greater whole that we're trying to address. And so if there's anything that I can do with my work and my words and anything like that that can bring attention to social issues and social injustices in the community and even abroad, then that's what I'm going to try to do. And I said a lot.
Yeah. Uh, but it was good stuff.
Like,
Good stuff. Good deal. All right. So, yes, Ashley. So, yeah, a little bit about you and a little bit about some projects that you've done. And yeah, what was that like trying to get all that
Yeah.
together?
Well, hello. My name is Ashley Page. I'm a recent graduate from the sculpture department. Hi, Adrian. Um, I graduated with a degree in sculpture and a minor in public engagement. So I kind of find myself in an intersection quite often between the two, of kind of how can I bring my work out into the public eye, as well as how am I responding responsibly to kind of the greater, larger world around me, and using kind of the platforms that I am provided, and the techniques and the materials and my style and way of communication, to really bring the stories of not only myself and my family, but also of my peer group, and of individuals that I see are underrepresented, and kind of disregarded in the larger discourse of art and craft, and art history in general. So that's kind of how I use my work. So the past, oh my goodness, it's so weird to think that I graduated this past spring. It feels like, what is time, right? Where are we? So yeah, when Mecca closed last spring, I believe that was in April, right? Yeah, so it was in April, and I was in the middle of my senior year along with Athena. And I went home. I am originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I went home to be with my family, and to just kind of like, center myself. And not only was that, kind of the height of the pandemic, but it was also, over that time period, I, witnessed the city of Minneapolis kind of erupt in social uproar, and reclamation of space and reclamation of time and of energy, and really begin to respond to the murder of George Floyd, and being so centrally located in a movement that way, really, it gives you a different perspective of what art is and what art means. because over that time period, you know, not only are people protesting on the streets and rioting and, you know, really quite actively reclaiming their space and taking it back, and taking back their resources, but they're also responding, and using art as their mode and method of acting and of using their voice. So not only, you know, it wasn't even like artists with a capital A of like, oh, I went to art school and I got my MFA and, you know, yada, yada, yada. But it was really people who were passionate and who needed to say something and who felt that art was that way of expressing how they felt. So, I mean, and what that really looked like was a lot of, I mean, admittedly, a lot of graffiti. But it was also people would bring out like 6-foot canvases of portraits or of, you know, full on freestanding sculptures that they just put out in the streets. And wheat pastings and putting out posters, and a lot of murals were produced over this time. And you know, that kind of being in that space and seeing that response from people really kind of elicited my own call, and kind of made me reevaluate like what am I doing, what am I saying. You know, I'm an art student and I don't even live here anymore, but this is my community. You know, this is the neighborhood that my family grew up in, and how can I really add to that? So what that resulted in was a series of wheat pasting projects that I used cyanotype prints, which are like those, they're traditionally like a blue botanical photosensitive negative of a print. And so I printed portraits of individuals who have had their lives taken from them due to either racially motivated violence or police brutality. So it started off with, well, the series itself started with Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Ahmaud Arbery. And I took their images and I printed it on like a transparent film, and I inverted it so it was negative. So when it exposed, it was positive. And then I kind of put them in like a ring or like a kind of a vignette of flowers, and you know, kind of posted those all around. My friend and I posted those all around the city. And it was incredible to see kind of the response. I thought I was going to get arrested. I literally had a backup plan. I was like, if I have to make bail, come get me. But it was so amazing to see, you know, being out. And we did this like during the day. We were bold. We didn't care. And it was amazing to see people being like, thank you for doing this. This is what we want to see. This is like the type of thing, like this is our city, you know. This is what we want, you know. And that was just like, that was something that I had never really engaged with, especially still being a student at that time and still making work kind of in the walls of an institution and in the walls of a gallery, and not being able to really directly engage with an audience that way was like I was like, okay, things are real. And so after that, I think we like wheat pasted for like 2 days, and then I came back to Portland because I was starting another job here. And so it was kind of like I had left this like nebulous of social justice and like public art and like this energy of equity and demanding to be heard, and I entered back into Portland where it was very quiet, and you know, people marched on Congress and it was calm. And I was like, where's the firefighters? Like, where are the helicopters? I don't hear them. We're not under martial law anymore. And so that kind of jolt of like the conversation and how the conversation was being had was really jarring to me at the time. And, you know, the way that Portland was reacting, and it felt so protected from this conversation, and it felt so like, you know, we care, but, you know, this doesn't really affect us because we're here in this little like nook and cranny of the US. And that really sat with me. That really didn't sit with me right. So I continued to bring the wheat pasting project here. But what I also did was I expanded the portraits. So I included other individuals from not only across the US, but also 2 individuals that were, one was a Portland, Maine native, Isaac Muse, and then another was an individual who just lived in Portland, Chance David Baker, and both of them, you know, were murdered here in Portland, and others, including Renisha McBride, and you know, it was really just the opportunity to really say that this is a conversation that's happening all across the nation. This is happening here in Portland. You can't ignore it. This isn't something that you just kind of like can post on your newsfeed. You know, it's happening right here. And so that wheat pasting project also resulted in a mural at 754 Congress. That was facilitated by Indigo Arts Alliance and the Francis Hotel, as well as Tandem Bakery, because they had an abandoned building that was condemned, and they didn't know what to do with it. So they brought it. The Francis had brought it to Indigo to, and really we're like, you know, we want to have this conversation, and we want to bring public art into the city, and we want this conversation to be had. And so the front of the building is counting from 13th with Titi de Baccarat and Ryan Adams and Daniel Minter, while Rachel Adams and I occupy the right side of the building with Fallen Blooms, which is a wheat pasting and spray painted mural kind of collaboration. So she has her floral design prints, and then I have my wheat pasting, or the wheat pasted posters that I was using. And with that piece, it was really much more important for me to kind of tell the story of the multiplicity of this narrative. So what I did is I removed the individual faces, and I removed sort of the specificity of this particular individual story, to really tell the story that, you know, this could be anybody, this could be you. You know, if you're Black in this country, this could be you at any given day. This could be your brother or your cousin or your nephew and your niece. And so that's kind of where that project is, and that'll be up for forever until they tear the building down. And then the project kind of accumulated into Congress Square Park, where they were doing an activation project where they had a series of 7 public art projects hosted in the space. And so I used the portraits that were from the cyanotypes, and I blew them up into 12 feet by 3.5 foot banners. And they hung on the light posts in the park for the month of September. And that was really, that one for me was like seeing the way that the wheat paste posters lived out in the world was interesting. You know, I would get photos of them from people being like, yay. But then I would also like walk past them, and then they were like ripped to shreds, you know, or someone would like vandalize them, or people would just disappear altogether. And so it's really weird to see that, you know, when you put your voice out there like that, and when you kind of place your own, when you just put your own like words and kind of images and things out into the world, and you don't really have ownership over them, and they just become a part of the public space. It's like, how do people interact with them? And so with Congress Square Park, it was really nice because I was like, you can't touch these. I was like, this can't. This is above you. This is citywide supported, and you can't tear this down. And so on the back of the poster, or on the back of the banners, it also has a list of names of other fallen individuals who have unfortunately suffered a similar fate. Just to be able to not only, kind of recall their lives and their memories, but also to explain that, even the 7 people who are on these portraits are not the only ones. Um, and and yeah, I mean, that's kind of how things are. And I mean, that's only one part of my practice. That's just the like actual physical art making side. There's also an entire like arts organization, arts administration and kind of social organizing side, which more includes like curated exhibitions and symposiums. Like the Athena also was a huge help, and so is Liz and Shiva, and so many people on this call of doing the Resilience Week last year. No, it wasn't even last year. It's still 2020. Woo, it was in February. Different world. And that was really so much more about cultivating the BIPOC community here in Portland, and to really begin to putting in systems of supports for students of color at Mecca, as well as artists of color and community members, to really kind of connect and build those bridges between, the isolated bubble that is within the institution, and really begin to branch out into the greater, larger community. And invite these conversations, and show the work of these of people, and to really broaden the narrative. And yeah, that's where we're at. And now it's November, and now we're waiting for an election. And every day is a day. But I have a show that's up at the Portland Public Library called One Day at a Time. And that has been my philosophy for the past 6 months, is just taking it one day at a time. So thanks.
I feel like really this whole year is basically, one day at a time, sometimes a single hour at a time. And I definitely want to also touch on that aspect of organizing and what that looks like for artists. But at the moment, I want to briefly look at what is the artist's role in social movements, but really what are the artist's roles, right? Because it's multifaceted, and we often take on different roles. So like sometimes it's making art, and sometimes it's organizing, and sometimes it's volunteering. I know for me personally, like as a primarily a video artist, my first reaction is to document, because I'm thinking years down the line, we need to show what this moment was. And we need to show that to people who weren't there, or to people who forget, because that's another thing that's easy to do. It's easy to forget where we've been. And so for me, during the summer and during the protest, I was grabbing my camera and just launching and taking as much video and sound as I possibly could. But I know that there are so many other roles, and that, you two as sculpture makers, and printmakers and painters and ceramicists and graphic artists, all can react differently. So for an artist, is it our role to make art? Is it our role to organize? Is it our role to run for as politicians? Like, do we need more artists in positions of power and decision making? If you two wanted to just share your thoughts on what you view the artist role, and as culture makers and in social movements.
I guess I'll take this one. Well, part of it. For me, the role of the artist is I would say, to be engaged, to be aware, and to be present. It's my dance teacher back home always says it's one thing to be in the world, but to be of the world. And it's like it's one thing to just be in the world and you're just observing. It's another thing to be in the world and not only are you observing, but you're also actively involved in it. And so I'm a people watcher. It's just kind of what I do. So like I just kind of like mentally document things, and I can't not respond. It's like I guess I would more so consider my work to be reactionary, specifically reactionary to things that are happening around me. And it's like if someone were to pose the question, well, why? Well, this is why. You know what I mean? And so like I feel as though like the role of the art, and this is just how I feel the role of me being an artist is to be engaged and to be active. And that's not the role for every artist, and being engaged doesn't necessarily mean that you're physically in the midst of it. That could be from the standpoint of support. It could be, that if you're making posters, if you're making calls, if you're sharing information, if you're even if just passing, there's so many different ways to be actively involved. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're physically walking down the street carrying a sign. You know what I mean? Like there's so many different ways to be involved and not just be a bystander. And I think that's what it is like the pandemic forced everyone to stop being a bystander, almost, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like there was so much happening. We had the pandemic, there's people getting sick everywhere. It wasn't just an isolated thing. Everyone's home because we have no choice but to be home. You know what I mean? And so like you're around people that you're not always around 24/7, like before all of this happened, maybe you're just around your friends and family maybe a couple of hours out of the day. Whole families are now around each other all the time, and they're gathering and they're doing and they're experiencing other things, and they're experiencing them all together. And then we had all of these unfortunate and horrible situations happening also across the nation, people literally being killed, and it's being witnessed. So now not only are we dealing with nature essentially kind of trying to reclaim and engaging us in a way that we don't want to be engaged, but now we're also dealing with social engagements that are injustices that some of us may not have necessarily been privy or exposed to, and now we're being exposed to them, and you can't look away because you're not because it's everywhere. Everyone's documenting. And that was the other thing too. There's so much documentation of all of these things happening. So even if you decide I don't want to watch this on TV, well, guess what? That little thing that you like to carry in your pocket, your phone, it's all over your phone, whether it's on Twitter, whether it was on Instagram, whether it was on Facebook. It was everywhere. People were just like fed up. And this pandemic and being somewhat isolated, we became isolated from the greater whole of society. But on the flip, we also became almost more connected at the same time as well, because everyone's sharing information and passing, this is what happened, well, this is what and like I'm documenting this and I'm filming this, or I photographed that happening, and passing and sharing all this information that essentially everyone in society in a sense has become an artist, whether they realize it or not, in one way or another. Even just something is like graffiti, like all of it is a form of mark making. It was all mark making. Everyone was making a mark, we were all making a mark. We weren't just watching other people make marks. We were all making marks. And a lot of us were doing it simultaneously. So much so to the point where it didn't just become an American thing. This became a global thing. You know what I mean? And I get a little emotional about it because for the very first time, probably in the history of injustices against Black and brown bodies, the entire world became a part of this conversation. And it wasn't just oh, you were just imagining that, you're just making that up, and oh, that's not what that means, you're overreacting. No, the entire world was seeing this. An entire world was saying, you know what, that's bull, and that is wrong. And I may be 24 hours ahead of you or 12 hours behind you in time, but I'm still with you. And I'm going to do whatever it is that I can as far as my role in this greater thing of that we call life, to try to support you and make my mark. And so, yeah, just coming back to the question, it's about being engaged. And again, yeah, that comes in so many ways.
Yeah, I think that was a yes. I think you encapsulated so much of what it's like to live in the world. And I think the only I can only not only mimic what and champion everything you're saying, but also add to it by saying, I guess the way that I view my practice, it's so much more, it's reflective, it's responsive, because I've come, and it's also ever shifting and ever growing, and it's never the same as it was yesterday. And the projects and the conversations that I'm having and facilitating, I mean, there's like the similar threads, but there's things that are interwoven, some of which are so specific to me, but then some of which are universal, and so I guess, what is the role of the artist today? It's like just to be present, absolutely, and to reflect. It's to show, it's to be the mirror of the world around you. And I think we do that inadvertently, even if we're not thinking about it, even if we are just making things that are very specific to our own experiences. But then even then, there's a universality in that as well, of we experience the world as we are. I experience this world as who I am, as a Black woman, as a young woman, as someone who is fluid thinking and fluid expression. And it's one of those things where, the world, I respond to it the way that it responds to me. And so my output is only, a record of that. And so I think that depending on, what kind of conversation you want to be having, or what experiences you've had, and the way that it plays out in your life, it can only be as honest as you are with yourself. And sometimes, it's not. And I think that people pick up on that, is that honesty, and that kind of that deep gut reaction that you have to things, and that you have to certain to certain experiences, or certain themes, or certain conversations being had. And it's like, if you're making from there, nobody's going to tell you that you can't talk about this, or that this isn't a conversation that's important. Because if you feel that way, just knowing your truth, and knowing how you feel, and just being able to express that, and having the freedom and the time and the ability to do so, I think is huge. And it's political in its own right. I think there is just as much validity in being a politician, and making laws and making policies, and putting these things into writing, and actually seeing them fulfilled in society. But I think the role of the artist is really to be able to reflect what that looks like. And so I always look to the different sorts of graffiti and the public art that's coming out that shapes the actual physical landscape and the public landscape that we engage with, because I mean these are reflections of who we are, and that's what I look to work as. And even looking in art history is literally just as embedded in our own human history as you know, human remains. So I think we can learn just as much from all of it. And so I don't know, I think about making work and I think about what are people gonna like. I mean, maybe I don't know, it's like one of those things where I'm like, do I make for now? Sometimes, but then also I think about what is the future going to look like, and how am I reflecting today and right now? And sometimes that's just what I feel, like how I feel today. But it's a record, you know, it's an archive.
One of my favorite quotes by one of my favorite people, Frida Kahlo, is, you know, I never painted my dreams, I painted my reality. And I think when we as artists, when we make and we create from our reality, that that provides this amazing connection to people who may be far from, you know, our reality. You know, they may come from very different backgrounds and experiences, but they still can connect with our art because we are making from that truthful place. And yeah, and I agree. I think you definitely have to know what's going on. I mean, one of the things I do is every day I make sure like I'm in tuned to some international news thing, right? So I'm checking on the news, I'm checking on what's going on in the world, because like you can't really be of it if you don't know what's going on, right? What's going on in your community, what's going on around in national communities, and also what's going um, on that global scale. Um, so I think that, yeah, that's also a very important component to staying engaged. I think we have an hour. Um, so this may be our last question, but I really wanted to touch on it because I think it's really important for artists, and especially young artists, to think about is what is that that practical side of planning out public projects and finding partners, community groups to partner with. I think all the three of us have really found great support in Indigo, Indigo Arts Alliance. We've all kind of, yeah, gravitated there. And it's a topic that, you know, even when I was trying to do some public projects in Kennedy Park last year, you know, I had no idea about what organizing looked like, or, you know, what reaching out to people looks like, or what scheduling looked like. And, you know, kind of dived in and quickly found out that I needed to take some swimming lessons. But you two, yeah, you two are much more well-versed in that area than I am. And I think it's really important for students to kind of get that insight, so they can really do these projects successfully. So yeah, what are some aspects of that organizing or some advice for planning that out?
I think that's such a good question. So I would say, in terms of partner with people who know what you're doing. Partner with people who know your mission, who see the vision, and who want to bring it to fruition in the best way possible, and who everybody is on board. Um, and people who are able to give you the platform and kind of set you up for success. I think that is deeply, deeply, deeply important. I also think, I do not have my Indigo hat on today, even though I am here. But as not only an employee of the space, but also as a community member, and seeing the work that Indigo has done and has been able to facilitate within the community is incredibly inspiring. I know that even as a student and as someone who wasn't really outside of the organization before I entered the role that I am in now, I mean, I was supported in so many different ways, just by being in community with one another. And I think that's another thing too, of like thinking about who are you in community with, and really being able to really spread that outreach, thinking about people and organizations and things and foundations and people who you wouldn't really think, to partner with, but also recognizing that Portland is so small and that everybody kind of knows each other. And that even just something as simple as an email is the first step in everything, and saying hello, and sending a very sweet email is really, truly will get you so much further than anything. Also, I mean, in the days of showing up is really deeply important. Showing up for other people, showing up for yourself, advocating for yourself, advocating for other people. I mean, in this world, it's so deeply important to be in collaboration and to be in solidarity. What is the other part of the question? So you're talking about swimming lessons and what does outreach and scheduling and all of that stuff look like? I mean, really, a piece of advice that somebody had given me was to set yourself, find people who you can go to and say, am I doing this right? Am I what am I doing? Two, how can I do it? And build in systems of support, and build in systems and people and things that will help you along the way, because I mean, people will, and people do, myself included. So it's quite a bit easier said than done sometimes, but I think just the initial act of putting yourself out there is a great one. And also doing it, doing the work is not always the easiest thing, but it is the most, I would say, one of the most visible, and deeply moving, is to see people actually doing the work. And yeah, that's kind of that's my advice to leave off on.
Just kind of piggybacking off of what Ashley said, I would say first and foremost, my grandmother used to say, I gotta lead with the Nana-isms, because that's just that's just me. Shut mouths don't get fed. You can't You can't do something and expect that something's going to happen if no one knows what it is that you're trying to do. And, sometimes that's just simply saying something, speaking up, saying, hey, I want to try this thing. Or even like Ashley said, something as simple as saying hello, even if that's in the form of an email. So I would say number one, communication. Don't be afraid to speak to someone. That conversation can lead you somewhere that you may not have even expected. You know what I mean? Like you could be toiling in your mind about some project you're trying to accomplish, and you have no idea absolutely how you're going to go about it, and you find yourself in a situation where you're just having a casual conversation with someone, and next thing you know, like the person you're talking to could be the help that you've been stressing out looking for. you know um you're not an island. You can't do everything by yourself. It is impossible. You will be stressed out and you will be burned out. You need help. Collaboration is key. If I did not have help from Ashley, Alejandra, uh, Kelly, Indigo, like so many people helped me put together Juneteenth. You were my documenter. You know what I mean? Like if I did not have all of you as support and as help to pull off Juneteenth wouldn't have happened. It would have just been you know what I'm saying? Like it wouldn't have been we wouldn't have got to the th. Okay, like it just would have been that would have been it. So like collaboration, and yeah, being present, like yet capitalize on the fact that yes, Maine is small, but there's not even it's not 6 degrees of separation in Maine. It's like a half a degree. Like everybody knows everybody, and that's across the state, not just in Portland. That's across the state. I've encountered people that I've met when I was living further north in Maine that know people down here that I had no idea how the hell they even know each other, but they know each other. And they're like, oh, do you know such and such? And I'm like, yeah, but how do you? Never mind. Anyway, so it's like, use that to your advantage. You know what I mean? Networking. Yes, Indigo, I've met so many people because of my affiliation with Indigo. I and like yes, like yeah, putting yourself out there, whether it's going to an artist lecture, going to a gallery opening, supporting. It doesn't just have to be you putting on a show. Go support. And right now we're in the age of Zoom meetings. Go to Zoom lectures, ask questions, engage. This is how you build relationships with people. And then like when you find yourself somewhere down the line and you're trying to plan a project, some of these people are now a part of your network, and you can say, oh wait, I remember meeting that person, or I remember talking to that person, and actually get to know this person. And not only that, but now the person that you've engaged with, there's that word again, engaged. You know what I mean? That person or those people that you've now engaged with, they have a face to a name. You're not just like some random person that's reached out to them and they're like, I don't know who that is. Like, oh yeah, that's Liz. Yeah, I remember when you were at New Systems and you were at that show, and yeah, you were photographing this exhibition, and you can like, yeah. So now they can make it a connection. So now they don't feel like they're interacting with just like some stranger. There's some sort of a relationship there. There's something to build on top. Even though it may be a small foundation, it's a start. It's something it's a jumping off point. And knowing who your organizations are in the community. Again, a lot of these people that are in our community and these networks are people that are actively involved in these organizations. So literally it can just simply be, again, as simple as having a conversation with someone. Hey, I'm trying to do this thing. Oh wait, I know Ali is associated with Maine Youth, with Maine Youth Justice. Or oh hey, I know Marco and Mimi also do something with Maine Youth. Okay, those are connections. And then it just goes from there. And then it literally almost to a degree becomes a point where it's just like, okay, you can kind of pick and choose who you want to do something with, or what is it, that specific role that you need those people or that person to do in regards to what it is that you're trying to do. Realistically, as far as scheduling and organizing, set realistic timelines for yourself. Rome wasn't built in a day. I know there's a lot of anecdotes, but a lot of these things hold true. You can't say I'm going to plan out this whole, like I said, Juneteenth was pulled off in 10 days. If I had more time, yes, it probably would have been more grandiose and all that other stuff. But in the amount of time that I had, it was amazing. But that was also a very extenuating circumstance because we're in a pandemic. But set yourself realistic timelines. What can I get done that will put me forward as far as getting this project done that I can knock out in a day? That might just be something as simple as, if it's just that one thing that you need to accomplish for that day, then do it. Set out to get it done and then move on to the next thing. Don't make a list of several things that you're trying to do and then you're still struggling with one. You haven't even made it to the other 6 or 7 things that you have on that list. So it's be realistic. And again, that also comes back to collaboration. Your network, your support system, that support system can help you knock some of those tasks off that list. So you're not doing it by yourself, and that also includes the organizations that you're trying to partner with. Sometimes they can also help you with those things because they may have a more extensive platform to facilitate some of those things. So if there's anything that anyone can gather from this, it's being present, speaking up for yourself, communicating. For people that are shy or introverts, again, like I said, shut mouths don't get fed. You're only going to get so far being quiet.
Mm-hmm. Can I say too, I came to a revelation one day where and this isn't huge, but for me, I was like, because it was I had a moment where I was like, the worst thing anybody can ever say is no. That's it. And even then, it's usually no, but, and then you're and then they send you down another rabbit hole of things and things. So,
or they send you to someone else who can do it.
Yeah. And I mean, staying curious is important. Also knowing your capacity is important. The first thing that I ever organized was myself, but, past that, starting somewhere where the work doesn't eat you is important. But also I want to be conscious of time. I know we have an hour, but I can take questions if needed, but otherwise, Liz?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Just really quickly, when collaboration is your practice, support is your practice. So, I mean, collaboration is such, and I learned that after, moving up here and going through the MFA, that through collaboration, you get that support. And that's how we all succeed there. So, yes. We are more than happy to open it up if anyone has any questions for Ashley or Athena. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions.
I have a question. First of all, thank you three so much. This was really great. And I know you both, Athena and Ashley, talked about being engaged as a big part of your artistic practice. And I'm hearing so many folks today, especially artists, saying I just need to step away for a moment and I need to not be engaged with what I'm hearing on the news and in politics, and then I'll return to it, of course. So how does that impact your artistic practice when you have to take breaks? And do you have self-care? What are some self-care options that you recommend for artists?
Yeah, I mean, I think taking breaks is seriously needed, seriously real, especially in a world that is not, that's not built for you right now. and recognizing the emotional labor, and the taxing and the effort that it just kind of takes to exist in this world, as a person of color, as a woman, um, as everything that I am and everything that I'm not. It's like, it's a lot. I mean, I'm not making right now. I'm not doing it, just because I need to be a human. I need to just live life and experience life. And I think that's a part of the reflection of, like, you have to intake to be able to extake, or do the thing. So yeah, I think self-care is deeply important. What that looks like for me is writing a lot. It's not something that I feel like I have to show anybody. It's not something that's on display. It's just really a mode of processing. Sleeping, and reading books, or watching Netflix and watching trash shows where I can just melt into it and I don't have to think about it. I don't have to think about anything because it's me and girlfriends and it's good. But yeah, I think just being able to build in, different ways to support yourself. I remember I was having a conversation about this with Reggie Hodges, because I was like, because we were just talking about how crazy everything is and what life is like, and how do we sustain ourselves. And he was like, Ashley, every morning I think about what is a little thing that I can do, what is a little piece of good that I can put into this world just today. And even if it's as simple as like treating yourself someday, or like washing that cup that's been sitting there on your desk for 3 days, like that little piece of good. And applying medicine is needed, applying medicine to those wounds, either spiritually or physically or mentally or emotionally, and just getting that salve ready. So yeah.
For me, yeah, sometimes you got to step away because it can be so overwhelming to the point where you become unproductive and now you're just kind of like hitting this wall. And so in terms of like self-care, like for me what that looks like is, similar to Ashley, like a um indulging in mindless television where, like, again, like it's something I don't have to think. I can just kind of just veg out and just let my mind just kind of chill and just not you know what I mean, just not stress, and just if it just literally almost just kind of like put myself in a little bubble and it's just like, oh, these things just don't exist, at least for an hour they don't exist, you know what I mean, and then I can come back to it and then like do whatever it is I'm going to do or I need to do. And that can be me connecting with friends, spending time with friends, making a meal, sharing a meal with friends, or having a conversation with one of my brothers, whether it's ridiculous or not, or, laughing with my nephew on social media, things like that. Sometimes just socializing, and just for me, it's communing with people that I care about and that are a part of my support system that help me in terms of my self-care. When I can remember to go meditate, I totally missed the POC, the BIPOC meditation the other day, but it was on my to-do list. But I was literally so tired that my body was just like, we need to sleep. And that's what I did. So my meditation was eyes closed and dreaming. And like, yeah, sometimes it's just that, let your body rest before your body tells you that you need to rest. Because once your body tells you to rest, sometimes it's not a good thing, because that can manifest in aches and pains, and you don't want that. And so rest, I can't advocate for that as enough. Like rest, 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 and hydrate, hydrate, hydration of the skin, hydration of the body, drink water, put lotion on, You know, these are like as silly as it sounds, but like just hydration, because it's like you start drying out because you're not taking care of yourself. Now you walking around looking like a raisin and you don't know what's going on. And they're like, you're doing a great job. You're like, thank you. Oh, you know. But yes, rest and hydration across the board.
Good deal. Are there any other questions for Ashley or Athena? No. Okay. Well, I really want to thank all of you for coming, and really everyone at Mecca for just taking part in really making the Get Out the Vote campaign this year come alive. And I want to thank Ashley and Athena for coming today. I know y'all are very busy, and I really appreciate you both really taking time out to talk with us and with students. Yeah, and I just want to tell everyone to, yeah, take care of yourselves first, and you know, you'll be able to do the work that we do even more successfully then. Okay, well, thank you everyone, and I will see you all in the later time. The brain is shutting down.
Have coffee yet?
Not enough. Not enough.
Thank you, everybody.
Coffee.
Thank you.
It was really
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Be well.